Good evening. Bill DuBois here in Greenville, Texas. This is for Sam Hall's Bible Ministry. I'm recording this on February 4th at my home for our Sunday study on Genesis chapter 50. Now, Genesis chapter 50 has 26 verses. Now, I read chapter 49, and 49 is a very important lead-in to chapter 50. And the reason for that is in chapter 49, Jacob is describing his 12 children. Now, Joseph is the 11th of 12. Of course, we all know that represents the 12 tribes of Israel. So, but the other 11 brothers are not very nice guys. They've done a lot of bad things. They've lied and stole and did all these transgressions. But Joseph was the good guy. He was very, very good. But his brothers sold him into slavery into Egypt. And so while he's in Egypt, he interprets the Pharaoh's dream. And the Pharaoh was so impressed with that he decided to put him up there in the head, pretty high on the chain of command, you know. And so that now when just before Jacob dies, Joseph comes home, and now they're talking in chapter 50 what Jacob wants Joseph to do with his body, where he wants to be buried and who he wants to be buried with. You'll have to read the chapter to find out what that's all about. But here's the key thing about chapter 49, where it ties into chapter 50, is his own brothers lied to Joseph, saying that their father Jacob told them to ask Joseph for forgiveness for all the transgressions and evil things they've done over their life. And Joseph did that. He forgave them. Even though they had sold him into slavery, they forgave him. Or he forgave them, I should say. It's a very fast read. But there's a lot of neat stuff in this chapter, and I'm looking forward to have Sam go through these individual verses and dissect each sentence within those verses to give us the true meaning of what is going on in Genesis. So join us tomorrow morning, please. Make sure when you do join us, you have your Bibles ready to get into Genesis chapter 50. So with that being said, we'll see you on Sunday. And again, I want to thank you for being a believer and follow along with Sam's studies. As you know, he is a very dynamic teacher, instructor. So that's great. So anyway, y'all take care. Then I will see you on the back side of that study. So with that being said, may God bless the United States of America. May God bless our military and first responders. And may God keep our athletes in China safe. That's all I ask. So we'll see you on the backside. Bye. You're on.
Alrighty. And no, just to answer your question, this Memphis here in Egypt is not where Graceland is. So, no, it's a completely different Memphis. Anyway, good day to you folks. February the 6th here, and gotten up out of the freezing temperatures. It's been nice, though. I like it. Genesis chapter 50, and I do encourage you, I do believe Bill has put out a little video discussing chapter 49, and that would be a very good read, a very good skim over quickly to study going into 50, because at 50, well, the book of Genesis starts out with creation and life given there in the garden. It ends after a rather really dysfunctional family is brought about, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And 49, the end of 49 tells of Jacob. It ends up with a casket, a coffin, a funeral in in Egypt on their way to years later back to Israel. That's how it ends up. Why? Because mankind's rebellion. This is why. There's a whole chapter, many verses in the first middle part of Genesis about so and so lived whatever years and died, and so I think the word died is in there. I don't know how many times, 20 times. Many times and died. Well, that's because of mankind's rebellion. But during all that, we also see that the faithfulness, the ones that are faithful in the God of heaven, they're provided the way for life. They're provided and taken out for life. So let's get started into Genesis 50. But I do encourage you to read 49 because, especially the last few chapters, 28 on, tells about the death of Jacob, why Joseph is so sad in 50. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. It is just unrestrained sadness. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel, or Jacob. They spiced him. They made his body look as best it could in death. This was not a hack job. We see how long it takes. This was not a hack job by people that didn't know what they were doing. These were professional people, embalmers, that knew what to do about the internal organs, right, the blood, the water, and everything else, and how to make the body, the skin and bones, look as good as possible and be as good as possible without being alive. Verse 3 says, and for 40 days were fulfilled for him. 40 days were fulfilled for him. For so the fulfilled days of those which are embalmed, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. So another 70 days. And these were not professional mourners that we read about over in later on in different books of the Bible, New Testament, whatever. They were just paid together around a funeral procession and go, oh, and weep and cry and moan and throw their hands up and fall down. These people, why? Why were they doing this, Bill? Because this man Joseph was their little d deliverer. And he was one of the youngest sons, Joseph and Benjamin, down at the end there, from the 12 tribes of Israel that had been taken over by Egypt. And remember, there was a drought years earlier, read a few pages back, a severe drought in the land of Egypt here. And so Joseph had gone up to old Potiphar and the rest of the leaders, stuff like that, the Pharaoh. He becomes second in command. We just got through with a good old boy named Daniel, who had been promoted. Why? Because of his faithfulness in the Lord God of heaven. Okay? So most of you will probably know the story. Joseph is one of the younger sons of Jacob, who became Israel. You have all of these other tribe names, his sons' names, and Jacob now has passed away. In this previous verse, he crossed the hands of Ephraim and Manasseh and all that, and read up on that to see where we're at here. But Joseph now is crying and is sad because his dad has passed away, Jacob has passed away, and his brothers that had not treated him very nicely throughout his younger life are now going, wonder what he's going to do to us, because he is the boss man in the land.
That's right.
So we're going to see. So all this is going to take place in this land. So but first of all, let's get through with the embalming part here and the crying in the morning, which is dutifully so. And it says in 4, and when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, and saying, if thou have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray thee, into the ears of Pharaoh, saying, if you would ask my permission, I want you to on my behalf. My father made me swear, saying, lo, I die in my grave, which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. So out of that first part right there in the end of 5, Joseph promises Pharaoh, I'm going to come back. But if you read the next verse, let's read the next verse that goes with it. And Pharaoh said, go up and bury thy father according as he had made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh and the elders of the house and all the elders of the land of Egypt and all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house. Only the little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And that is right here in the upper north eastern part of the land mass of Egypt, which is a large area, Egypt here. Pharaoh rules all this here, and so all of them stayed in the land of Goshen, but they want to go back over here to this area. Here's the Dead Sea, here's the Jordan River. This area mass right here is Israel. So he wants to go Hebron and then later on to Shechem, where Joseph's going to be buried. But Pharaoh goes, you know, I do trust you, but all of your entourage is going to be gone, and I really like the way things are going with you in my land, so we're going to keep your little ones in your flocks. What does that do? It assures that they are going to return, right, to get the rest of their family, because it says all of them went with him. And right. Pharaoh's not like, this boy's been a really big blessing to my house. He's not one of us. He's actually an Israelite, but look what has happened in the land of Egypt since he's been here, right? So you can say, this old boy ain't no dummy. So you get that out of there?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it looks like there was nobody left in Israel, in Egypt.
A whole bunch of them went, yeah. The Egyptians were, that was about it, yeah. Now we're talking about a large entourage of people here, okay? Mm-hmm. So, let me see. This was surety to return from Pharaoh's viewpoint, plus much easier to travel for Joseph. If he didn't have the little flocks with him, the young of the flocks, all of them to take care of and feed and water and make sure that they were okay during the journey, that's a pretty good trek. Going from this area here back up to any part of Israel, it's a pretty good little ways there. I kind of calculated it'd almost be like crossing, let's say from, well, we mentioned Memphis a while ago. Let's say from Texarkana to Memphis, Tennessee, somewhere around there. Maybe not that far, but about just get that in your mind from here up to this area. So that's pretty good little ways, and on foot, or camel, or horseback, or donkey back. So to not have little bitty kids to worry about and to take care of, and the little young flock, it was a smart idea all the way around.
Right.
Plus, it ensured that they were going to come back.
Right.
So 9 says, and there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation, and he made a mourning of his father 7 days. So another week after the embalming, after the mourning there with the Egyptians and all that. Now why? Why were the Egyptians doing this, Bill? Why would the Egyptians pause during their day? They had seen what had happened with this man, Joseph, this young man who came there. Remember the story. Right. His elder brothers took him, beat him up, put him in a hole out in the field somewhere, and took his robe and it had blood on it. They took it back to Jacob, several chapters over, but back over to your left. If you want to read it, you're familiar with it. And during that time, he had worked his way up because God had favor on this young man, Joseph. He stayed true even throughout Potiphar and his wife, another evil woman that tried to get at this young man and tear him down. He stayed faithful. It ran out from his coat. Remember all that? Had a lot to do with the coat, his clothing. Anyway, for years, Jacob had thought this man was dead. His young son Joseph was dead, but all that time God was elevating him in the land of Egypt, and the Egyptians saw it. Pharaoh saw it, Potiphar saw it, and everything else. It made him the boss of his house. Now that he's the second in command of the land, okay, but his brothers are still going, we know what we've done to this old boy. We kind of screwed him through his life, you know. So here they are, and it says, now there's another week at the end of 10. Read 11 and 12 and 13.
The local residents, the Canaanites, watched them mourning at the threshing floor of Atad. Then they renamed the place which is near the Jordan Abel Mizraim.
Mm-hmm.
For they said, this is a place of deep mourning for the Egyptians. 12. So Jacob's son did as he had commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Mesopotamia, near, looks like Merah.
Mm-hmm. That's close enough.
This is the cave that Abraham had bought as a permanent burial site from Ephraim and Ephraim the Haiti.
Hittites.
Hittite.
Ekron, the Hittite before Mamre, yeah. Now, let's bring about 13 right quick too. This place where Jacob was brought, was a place, and if you want to think about it this way, Abraham, before all this here, before these chapters here, several chapters back, had a great and mighty entourage with him. But no man did that for him. They even tried to back over a few chapters back, but God is the one that blessed him. But the only thing that he actually ever bought and owned, as far as him saying, that's on the wall there, that's my little plot, was that little plot of land that you just read about, where he was going to be buried. All through his whole life, he was thinking, well, one of these days I'm going to die. Remember, it was counted to him as righteousness when he believed God, and he brought him out of this land over here. It's further over here in this area, out of the land of the Urs, of the Chaldeans, the Babylonian area, in middle, southern, eastern Babylon area, which would be further over here, and took him and showed him this land. Then he walked north and south and west and east in this land, and that became Israel. That was the Israelites. This is the land that he formed, a people he formed, and gave them this land. When you hear our study in Proverbs on Wednesday, we read 2 different verses about don't mess with the borders. Leave my borders alone that I've set up as far as stone for each family, then divided by tribes, and then the whole land of Israel. Not only the physical borders, but the borders I've set up spiritually for you to follow, which is my guidelines. This is what he's talking about. So Abraham said, this is my wish, that I would be buried in 13, for the sons carried him into the land of Canaan, that's Israel, that's the promised land, and buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of a burying place. This is why he bought it, of Ekron the Hittite before Mamre. So I like 12 there. It says his sons did according to that which he had commanded them. Wouldn't that be nice, Bill, if children did that which their parents commanded them nowadays?
Yep.
Wouldn't that be nice? I bet it's what Proverbs says, maybe 30 times? Now, notice too in 11 that the Canaanites saw mourning and the floor of Atad. And they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore they called the name of Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. All this area here, the Jordan River, that's the little, if you can see that on your TV screen or wherever you're at, this is where they are. Here's the Dead Sea, here's Hebron, and then keep Hebron and Shechem in mind. We're fixing to read about that too. But all this land here up to, here's the Hittites, they mentioned them just then. It said the Canaanites saw the mourning. Now notice, it would help a whole lot if we do more studies, or the previous studies too, but y'all read that about where all these ites are, where they're going into this land, and how we should leave the land of Israel alone, because it's Israel's. It's not anybody else's. It's the land of Israel, yeah. Alrighty, well, let's move on from there. Anyway, they've made this trek now, and so Joseph and his brothers have buried Jacob in the plot appointed that Abraham had bought previously for a burying place. Now then, the mourning is done. What are they going to do? Turn around and hook them back, right? Okay, let's see what happens. Read 14 through 17. Oh, by the way, at the end of that chapter, at the end of that verse there, that's the first time he's been back home in about 39 years.
Whoa.
Isn't that interesting? Because where's he been? He was sold as a slave. Remember earlier, his brothers had kidnapped him, sold him as a slave, and then they, down the whole well, the whole bloody coat and stuff like that. They took about it. He's died. A lion ate him or whatever else. You remember the chapter? You remember the story about that? Okay?
Right.
And so here he is now back in his land, but it's been almost two full scores since he's been there. It's been over 39 years.
Yeah. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful.
Mm-hmm.
Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back for all the wrong we did, they said. In 16, so they sent the message to Joseph, before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, please forgive us, brothers, for the great wrong that did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin." When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Want to go with 18 too?
Now stop right there. You were asked the question. Let's see, in 49, Jacob blesses his sons. Remember that? He's called them out. Previously, we get a pretty good idea, and I encourage you to read. For time's sake, for this one study, we're just doing 50, but I'm ping-pong back and forth between what has already happened to bring us all up in memory of, these have not been good little boys. None of them have been good little boys. His sons, they've been evil. They've been jealous. They've been evil. He gives a name description to all of them. But now that they're telling him that, hey, before Jacob, before our daddy died, our father died, he wanted us to tell you that he wanted you to forgive us for what we did to you. Well, what would have been the best account for that? It would have been the best for Jacob to call Joseph in himself into his tent and go, "By the way, sonny, forgive your brothers. I know they're boneheads, but golly, look at all of our family line." Right?
That's flat ass lie.
Where do you think they got that trait from? Their daddy Jacob was called the deceiver. Remember that? He deceived his brother out of his birthright and the inheritance that went with it.
Yeah.
He wrestled with God, and then the sinew of his leg was whacked off because it was shortened because of his hard-headedness, hard-heartedness, stuff like that. This whole family, folks, and my point is not to browbeat them, but to tell you how God can still use people. The whole Abrahamic family was dysfunctional. All of them. Abraham himself, lying everywhere he went about Sarah, his beautiful wife. Sarah lied and laughed and scorned God about having a baby and this, that, and other. Rebecca and Isaac and on and on and on. And now Jacob, you get to Jacob, him and Esau, they were Hatfields and McCoys, they're 3/4 of their life or more.
Yeah.
So here's his other sons now, and they're saying, "Oh, by the way, everything is peachy keen between you and us now." Now, if he had not been in the position that he was in, and he was just little brother Joseph, he was little Joe, would they have said that?
No.
I don't think they would have.
No. You see, it's just they were fearing what their brother would do with the position he held within Egypt.
He had the authority to say,
Off with their heads.
These 11 here, off with their heads.
Yeah. But so they said, we better lie to this. I actually think that Jacob never told his sons that. They made that up so they could.
There was conversations going on, but I tell you what, they were pretty wiry about things.
Yep.
18 says, again, this prophecy is true about Jacob being the sun and Rachel being the moon, and then the sons of Israel being the stars. Here it says, and his brethren also went and fell down before his face. So this happens over and over again because remember, Joseph was a dreamer. He was called the dreamer.
Yep.
And he had already had a dream as young Joseph, teenage, probably mid-teens or early 20s, about my family. I dreamed a dream, and I saw the sun and the moon and many stars, and they all bowed before this one here. Well, he was that other one. So the sun being Jacob, the moon being Rachel, his mother, and the fellow brethren being the stars. They do it again right there. So this prophecy is again true. They went before him and fell down before his face, and they said, "Behold, we are thy servants." Well, already over in 37, 9, and 10 is when he had that dream. If you want to read it, Genesis 37, 9, and 10. 19 says, "And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for I am in the place of God. For am I in the place of God?" What's the answer to that? In reality, no, he's not in the place of God. But as far as them living and being able to take another breath, yes.
Yeah.
In the land of Egypt, when they go back to the land of Egypt, he's vice boss. There's Pharaoh, and then there's Joseph. I find it interesting that all throughout the Bible we have little Israelites that are placed in positions of high authority by the hand of God to rule over
Egypt, Babylon.
It's amazing. Yep. 19. What did I write about that? As usual, Joseph says God only gets praise and glory. Yeah, see, he always gives God the praise and glory there. 20 says, now I want this is what's over my right shoulder, says, but as for you, he's bringing this about. Now this is what really gets him. Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as is in this day, to save much people. So his brothers sold him as a slave, and they didn't have any mercy on this young man. Why? Because Jacob looked at him and had favor on him and said, "That's my boy Joseph right there." Joseph, he was the little boy that came to Jacob and got everything he wanted. Well, his brothers saw all that. What's so special about him? Well, God had made him special. They didn't like that. Instead of them going, "Yeah, that's my little brother Joseph," they were angry. They were jealous. They were envious of him, and they tried to kill him. But see what it say? So believers, take that verse right there and just mark that in your mind. Put that on your mirror and say, whatever the evil one, whatever the oppressor, whatever Satan throws at me, he means it for evil. But God is going to try. He is right now, already has, or will. You fill in the blank with all of them there. Going to make it for good, as long as I serve Him. God still saves. Right there in verse 20, He said, "It's God of salvation." 21 says, "Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. Remember, God is in control. Whatever goes on, Romans 8:28, anything and everything that goes on in a believer's life, if we trust in the Lord, whatever it is, if it's good or evil, bad, upside down, dark, whatever else, if we trust in the Lord, as our Savior, as who He says He is, He can take whatever circumstance and make it good. That's what He says. And He gets the glory for it. Joseph right here at this moment is getting really, really doing what Paul says about in the epistle to the Philippians, I believe it is, but he's heaping hot coals on their head. He says, "Yeah, I know what you'll do to me." Remember when He first revealed Himself to them? He was all Egyptian-like. He looked Egyptian. He sounded Egyptian. He was dressed like an Egyptian. And they thought he was, this is the grand poobah of this land. And then He started telling them things, and they're like, "Wait a minute, only our family member would know that. Wait a minute, only our brother would know that. That's our brother." What did He say? He didn't say kill him. He's had mercy on them all this time. He said, "I will nourish you and your little ones," and He comforted them. Now, if you'll remember, this whole area, folks, all of that had a huge national severe drought. And Joseph, the Lord had let him know what was going on, and instead of them not being the land that nourished everything, they've got the Nile River flowing right down the middle of them. Instead of them being able to nourish the known world, they were going to be in the drought too and be cut off. Maybe millions of them die. But Joseph, through the Lord God Almighty, said, "This is what you need to do." So what did they do? For 7 years they put away. They put stock away. They did the corn and wheat and whatever else. Put their grain away. So what had happened? Who came down here from a little ways and went, "Ding, ding, ding, let's go down to Egypt"? He nourished them then, didn't He? And now He said, all these years later, 40 years later, more than 40 years now, He says, "I'm going to do it again too." That's God's grace. That's God's salvation.
Yep.
Romans 8:28, what does it say?
And we know that all things come together for good
for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. This is what's going on here. That sounds like a good song.
It does. I need to redo it.
Bill, read 22 and 23 there. Now notice the words here.
So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his sons Ephraim, and he lived to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son, Machir, who he claimed as his own. Soon I will die, Joseph told his brothers.
That's 24 there.
You want me to read 24? Okay, I'm sorry.
Notice here, not yet.
Okay.
Notice here, it looks like Joseph has now become a great-great-grandpa. Is that what it looks like? Because it said under the 3rd generation. Mm-hmm. So Joseph saw Ephraim's children on the 3rd generation. The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought to him upon Joseph's knee. In other words, he was able to bounce on his knee there, going, "Oh, Gucci, Gucci, this is my great-great-grandson." And also, only Joseph was able to do this. Only Joseph was able to see this. Abraham wasn't able to. Isaac wasn't able to, and Jacob was not able to. But Joseph was. That's a special blessing that he got. 110 years old. Mm-hmm. Notice that. Now, if you'll remember, and I urge you again to go back to 48 and 49 and read the stories about. In 48, 8 and 9. About who are these? Joseph's father, and he said, "These are, bring them to me, and I will bless them." And then he crossed his arms. There's a special thing going on there too. And also, just rip it open and put it in your copy.
I wish they had a zipper, yeah. But that would be noisy too.
24 says, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die." And God, what do you think they did there? Whew, and we're still alive. Yeah. Now remember, these are his younger.
Older.
He is their younger brother. He's 110. That means they're all well up in their, let's say, 111 up.
But he had a tough time.
He had a real tough time.
Did he cut him out of his will?
Stuff, yeah, he had to go through stuff that they didn't because they put him through it.
But notice what happens here. He's still trusting in God, and Joseph faces death at 110 years old. This is what he says in the middle of 24. It says, "And God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob." Now, this will not be the day after he dies, folks.
Right.
This will not be. So what they're going to do here is, and Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, "God will surely visit you," which means in the future, this God of heaven that I've been serving all this time down here, that you actually put me in bondage down here, but he meant it for good. I'm now Grand Poobah. Look at me. So notice that if they did all this mourning for Jacob, who was just his visiting daddy, what do you think Egypt was like when Joseph died? Their deliverer, the one that delivered them out of the bondage of the drought that would have killed everybody. Yeah. I'm sure there was a great and mighty funeral, but look what he says, folks. Look here. 25 says, "And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence." Well, it only takes 400 years later. There are several generations that pass through this, but they finally do. And Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now, throughout this right here, God still says this is your promised land. 15:16, 48:4. 46:4, 48:21, and Hebrews 11:25 even mentions this man by name, Joseph, in what? The faith chapter. By faith. Joseph was buried. Joseph died in the land of Egypt. What happened? Next book, Exodus. What happens? They're going to leave. It's years and years later. They've been in bondage under the Egyptian rule here, but finally, this day of the visitation comes along. Hebrews 11:22, when he says that, I'm going to be taken out of here. I'm not an Egyptian. I've been promised by the God of heaven, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. My granddaddy, Abraham, bought a little piece of land for a burying place there in 5013 in Machpelah, and I want to be buried there too. Notice he didn't say, I want to be buried by Rachel outside of Bethlehem. I want to be buried where he told. There's Hebron, you go on up past the Dead Sea, and then there's Shechem. Right there. That's where his body was laid. 400 years later, it was taken by the children of Israel. That promise was kept by the hand of God because all of his brothers had died. Nobody lived to be 400 and some odd years old to remember, go, oh yeah, we got to take my brother Joseph. No. It was a brand new generation that Moses was leading that did what? Had faith in the same God. And they went and took him out of this area of Goshen here, out of Egypt, and trekked him all the way across. His bones, apparently they did a pretty good job of mummifying. Laid him in a coffin.
Well, the Egyptians had that down to it was a science.
It was a science, absolutely, sure. Yeah. So in Genesis, you got tears and death and mourning entering the human race. Revelation, tears and death and mourning are all done with for the redeemed. So they're being redeemed. And these folks, by the way, just a little note here at the end about resurrection and death and rapture and stuff like that. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, that are all buried in the land of Egypt, are awaiting we're waiting for the trumpet to sound to call the church home. They're waiting for the final resurrection when they're called, like Daniel says, Daniel 12:1 and 2. in the end time. They're all going to be called up. Their bodies that have been mummified, they're going to be perfected, and they're going to march right there into the land. They're really close to Jerusalem, into Jesus' millennial kingdom. Later, much later, but this is going to happen. It happened, if we can believe for 400 years, why can't we believe for 4,000?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what has happened. So all, let's see, 24 and 26, all was perfect with God in creation, and then human enters, the sin enters. I will thank you. So you deceivableness. When you're deceived, you get off track. And this is what's happened in these 50 quick chapters in Genesis. Is nice. Oh, death. See that? But they stayed faithful. Anyway, any questions about that?
I have a quick question. It says that he was placed in a coffin in Egypt.
Uh-huh.
But what does it say that they transported him to where his father and grandfather were buried?
It'll be in Exodus. I believe.
We'll turn a few pages over to 13:19.
Or
Which one?
It would be Exodus 13:19. That would be right. Exodus 13:19. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, and he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones away from hence with you. Exodus 13:19.
Bingo.
And they took their journey from Succoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness, and the Lord went before them by the day a pillar of cloud, and led them away by night a pillar of fire, and gave them light to go by day and night. And he took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night, from before the people. So they went all the way up out of the land of Egypt. This is their trek, going down here all the way down instead of going across. Good old Jewish people, they always do things the hard way, don't they? Anyway, here they are, and it ends up here in Shechem. Finally buried Joseph there, 400 and some odd years later.
Okay, so he was originally buried in Egypt, and then they moved him. Okay.
Yeah, he was put in a coffin, it says, actually. It
Yeah.
doesn't really say. It says he was put in a coffin. Jacob wasn't buried either. Jacob was embalmed, laid on display. All of Egypt mourned for days and days and days, and his immediate family did too. So he says, would you go up, ask Pharaoh, can we go? Sure you can, but I'm going to keep your little ones and your flock here with me in Goshen, and y'all take your trek up there. That way you're going to come back. So they did. He finally got back up there into the land of Israel, and then he says, well, now we've got to go back. When he gets back, a little while later, he dies. He goes up to him. I don't know how long it is between verse 23.
Well, you answered my question.
Yeah, 23 and 24. But he says, yeah, well, and he says, I die.
Interesting.
Hmm? Sure enough. So, let me 24:32. Let me look at another one. Joshua 24:32, and the bones of Joseph, this is Joshua 24:32, and the bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem. This is where I get that. In a parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver, and it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. So Genesis 50:29, Exodus 13:19. He was buried with his daddy right in that area right there.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Any questions?
No, sir.
Connie, come here and do for next week, and then Bill do for the week after that.
golly.
Our little twirly.
Okay.
See what it landed on. Okay, that was Genesis 50. I like the way we do this because it's something new every week for the Sundays.
Okay. That's against nature.
Thump it real hard. Thump that.
That's against nature. To go counterclockwise.
There you go.
Of course, that's how you are.
Romans, pick 1 through 16.
12.
Romans chapter 12. That will be next Sundays.
Romans 12.
Okay, next Sunday. Romans chapter 12. Bill, come up and do this too. That'll be 13th.
I should pick 13, I guess.
Daniel. We just did Daniel. Do it again. Acts? Is it Acts or what?
No, it's a limitation.
Lamentation? Okay, Lamentation 1 through 5.
1 through 5. Oh, no. Let's start with 1.
1? Lamentations 1 then. All right, very good. So for next Sunday, it'll be Romans 12. Sunday after that, on the 20th, will be Lamentations 1. How about that?
All right.
All right, thank you folks very much. That's how we do things around here. It's always fresh and new and exciting.
Yep.
And just let you know that it's not I think the Lord has shown me this to do for freshness, for something different every time. We need Old Testament, New Testament. I got 12 or 13 of them there listed. So, all right, thank you all very much.
That was Genesis chapter 50. Now, I thought that was a pretty good read. We had a lot of discussions going on in that particular chapter. We had Sam do something I have not seen him do before. We had a visual aid to be used with the maps. And so it was a pretty interesting study. I really enjoyed this one. We put our 2 cents worth in, both him and I, and talked, and we kind of figured that, how things happened back then. So I want to thank you for watching our study, and I'll be seeing you next Wednesday morning on the 9th when we do Proverbs chapter 22. So we want to thank you for watching this study, and that we appreciate your time that you spend with us. We will see you next week on Sunday, I believe it's going to be the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, whatever that means. So we'll see you later. Thanks a lot. Have a blessed day, and we'll see you next week. Bye.